In this video, I'm going to be giving you my overall thoughts and impressions on the FeiyuTech Scorp 2 gimbal. Now, I haven't been playing around with gimbals too much recently. I've been pretty content with my Hohem MT2, which handles my fairly light mirrorless camera setup just fine. But FeiyuTech did reach out to me to see if I wanted to review the Scorp 2, and I wasn't that familiar with the name FeiyuTech, so that prompted me to kind of take a look at the gimbal market right now, and I was pretty surprised to find that these FeiyuTech gimbals have been selling really well. In fact, they seem to be second only to DJI in terms of sales, which is interesting because I still remember the days when it was Giant that was the other big player in the mirrorless gimbal market. Now, after using the Scorp 2 for a while, I can see why this gimbal has become so popular. It has some really neat tricks up its sleeve, which I'm going to run you through right now. So the headline feature is obviously the built-in AI tracking camera it has. This is just something you don't find on other gimbals. It basically means you can have your camera follow your movements as you move around and can replace the need for an actual camera person depending on what you're trying to record. With the popular DJI RS series, if you want to get subject tracking, you need to purchase an image transmitter, and then subject tracking is done by analyzing the image coming from your own camera's feed. It's quite convoluted, not to mention expensive, whereas in the case of the Scorp 2, you get a camera built into the gimbal that is dedicated to tracking your movements, and as a result, you just end up with a much more streamlined and user-friendly solution to tracking. I'll be talking more about the AI tracking later in this video. Now, the second most noteworthy feature is the design of the gimbal itself. It has this dual grip design, which means that you can record low angle, underslung shots really easily. On other gimbals, you generally have to purchase a briefcase handle accessory, which will not only cost you more, but if you've used gimbals before, you'll know how annoying it is to deal with all these extra accessories like the camera brackets, the mini tripod attachments and whatnot. So it's nice to have one less accessory to worry about. It's just part of the gimbal itself. That being said, the dual grip design does give the Scorp 2 a slightly larger footprint, especially when you compare it to the DJI RS4, which falls down quite substantially, considering it has a modular design where the grip can be detached from the main body. Another little cool feature of the Scorp 2 are these pull-out legs you have on the side. These mean that you don't need a mini tripod attachment to have the gimbal stand up by itself. Now, I usually use a mini tripod with its legs closed anyway, because it just means you have more grip to work with. So it didn't make a huge difference for me personally, but if you're someone that prefers to use the gimbal without the mini tripod attached, then this will be really helpful because you have an easy way of setting it down anywhere basically. The Scorp 2 also comes with a 1.3-inch color touchscreen, and coming from the Hohem MT2, this made quite a big difference actually, because on the MT2 I had to memorize certain button presses to access certain settings, like hold this button for 2 seconds and then scroll through this pretty basic display it had. Whereas with the color touchscreen, the menus are much more intuitive and you don't have to really remember anything like that. Probably worth mentioning that newer DJI RS series gimbals do come with color touchscreens, and on the RS3 and RS4 I believe you get a 1.8-inch color touchscreen, which is bigger than the one on the Scorp 2, but in any case I found the slightly smaller screen on the Scorp 2 perfectly usable. The last feature I wanted to mention is this multifunction wheel. Now, this lets you control the zoom or focus as you would typically expect, but it can also be used to achieve really smooth pans and tilts. On most gimbals, you would do electronic pans and tilts using a joystick, which you can do on the Scorp 2 as well, of course. But the problem with joysticks is that they create fairly jerky movements, which just aren't as smooth as using this wheel. And my Hohem MT2 also has a wheel, but it can only be used for focusing, which is completely redundant in my case because my X-T3 doesn't have any compatibility with gimbals when it comes to focusing anyway. Now I wanted to move on to the stabilization performance of the Scorp 2. For reference, this video you're looking at now is my camera without a gimbal. Keep in mind I'm using an X-T3 which doesn't have IBIS, unlike the X-T4, so without a gimbal footage is really pretty unstable. Now this time I'm running up these stairs with my XT3 using the Scorp 2 gimbal. I think the results speak for themselves. Footage is much more stable. And for comparison, here are the results I was getting with the Hohem MT2. Footage is also pretty smooth, but if you look close enough, you can probably tell there's a bit of sway in the tilt axis especially, which I wasn't getting with the Scorp 2. Now, I don't know whether this difference is down to, a better algorithm or just because the Scorp 2 has more powerful motors. After all, it does support a higher payload. But in any case, yeah, the Scorp 2 performed better than the MT2, at least in my testing, when it came to stabilization. When it came to the AI tracking feature, I feel the Scorp 2 did really well. Operation is pretty simple. You use the OK hand gesture to start recording, and you use a thumbs in the opposite direction to stop tracking. I was pleasantly surprised to find that the Scorp 2 managed to keep track of me even when someone momentarily walked in front of me or I stood behind someone and reappeared in frame. Now, I don't know how reliable the AI tracking is in more uncontrolled environments involving more people or moving subjects, but I think it's definitely more than capable of recording yourself at home or maybe, recording yourself doing sports alone. You can also do custom framing, which means that you don't always have to be, dead center in the frame. You can be, offset to the left or right. Now, all this works very similarly to how the AI tracking works on the Hohem MT2. Few differences, however, the most obvious one being that with the MT2, the AI tracking camera is a magnetic clip-on attachment, whereas the AI tracking camera is just built into the gimbal itself on the Scorp 2. I prefer the Scorp 2's approach because you don't have the risk of the magnetic clip attachment falling off. But on the flip side, I guess if there's a problem with the camera, with the MT2, you can just buy a replacement. Whereas if the camera breaks on the Scorp 2, then you have to replace the entire gimbal, I guess. The other difference was with regards to how responsive the tracking was. I feel like the Scorp 2 was more responsive and a bit more twitchy, whereas the Hohem MT2, the tracking was a bit more smoothed out. But the difference was pretty minor, so it's hard to say which one was really better in that regard. So overall, I feel like the Feiyu Scorp 2 is a really solid gimbal. It doesn't have any obvious defects. I mean, I haven't tested the battery life extensively, but on paper it can manage 13 hours. I'll have to find out for myself over the coming weeks, but yeah, it'll probably be replacing my Hohem MT2 as my primary gimbal. The nice thing about the MT2, of course, is that I can also use it as a phone or action camera gimbal, whereas the Scorp 2 can't handle such small payloads. But if I was buying from scratch, I would then instead be considering the Scorp 2 Mini over the Hohem MT2 because they have the same payload capacity, and I think the feature set on the Scorp 2 Mini is just better because it has the touchscreen, the extra handle, and a built-in as opposed to detachable AI tracking camera. Now, I would say that if you're looking for a gimbal to use professionally with your mirrorless camera, then I would probably be looking at the DJI RS4 or RS4 Pro, simply because these are battle-tested gimbals with a proven track record and a bigger ecosystem for accessories in general. But if you're just doing solo work or, more casual filming gigs, then I feel like this Scorp 2 is really a pretty great alternative to the DJI. It costs a lot less. It has, its own unique features that you don't get on the DJI. And personally, I don't use gimbals enough to justify spending too much on them. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention about the mobile companion app on the FeiyuTech. This is something where the smaller manufacturers often kind of disappoint, but the FeiyuTech app was pretty usable in my opinion. It even had this gyroscopic motion control to control the gimbal. I don't know if it's just a gimmick or something that might actually be quite useful, but in any case, the UX was good and I can't really complain about it. So overall, I think the Scorp 2 is a really compelling option and probably by far the best gimbal in its price bracket.